guys, and welcome back to the Puro Wrestling Academy. I'm your co-host, Ray Russell here, inviting you guys to take a trip back with me, back to late, great 1961. This week on the program, we're going to be looking at all sorts of things going on in the world of Japanese professional wrestling, and in order to get to all of that, it's time to bring back on the man who's going to guide us, show us the way here, if you will. So let's welcome him back onto the program, ladies and gentlemen, the professor of Puro Race himself. Here he is, Mr. Dan Ginnetty.
Thanks for having me back, Ray. I'm excited to talk about 1961. 1960 was super exciting with the introduction of Baba and Inoki, and there's going to be more information, and we're going to be following their careers moving forward in this year, and we've got some other high points to hit on this year's program. Would you like to go over them?
Yeah, we'll get into the keynotes here in just a moment. You know, before we do, I wanted to let you know that I got a lot of feedback for our recent episode number 1 of the Puro Wrestling Academy videocast over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia, guys. Part of that VIP superfan tier. We do a lot of different videocasts, and now the Puro Wrestling Academy, part of that, I am happy to say. And what a fun first episode it was to sit there with you, with the master, the professor, I suppose, and watch some really great matches. Giant Baba versus the Destroyer for the vacant Pacific Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship. We got to see the likes of the original Sheik, Abdullah the Butcher, Cyclone Negro, and what I would call the main event, the meat of that show, Jumbo Tsuruta in his earliest known match that exists on film, or at least that they put out there so far, teaming with the Giant Baba, taking on Terry and Dory Funk Jr., guys. And get this, Jumbo just 7 months into his wrestling career, and he looked like he fit right in with those main eventers.
Oh my gosh, that was so fun to watch. Watching the Funks anytime, especially this is 1972 or 1973, and the Funks are still in their primes, and Terry is just crazy. And this guy, Jumbo, it's his first high-profile match on TV as far as we know, and holy smokes, what a coming-out party for him. If you are not VIP superfan, I can't tell you how much you're missing out. This show was so much fun for me to do. I hadn't done a show like that in almost 10 years, and before that, I was doing it a lot. It was back in the saddle again. It was like riding a bike. Ray and I really hit it right out of the park on the very first episode. It flowed. It was great. The matches were interesting, and we're following. This is kind of the video version of the history of Japanese professional wrestling.
Yeah.
And it's a ride that you don't want to miss. You should be coming along with it. If you are interested, you should take a chance and check this video cast out. It was so much fun to do, and we cannot wait. We've already got the second program, the matches selected, and we're ready to do it. It's going to be happening in the next few days, I would think. Yep. And it's going to be another slobber knocker of a show.
It should be. I mean, Mil Mascaras versus the Destroyer on the next episode. We're going to see the likes of Bruno Sammartino, Anton Geesink, a judo jacket match, Geesink versus one Gorilla Monsoon. You heard me right, guys. Gorilla in a judo jacket match. Didn't know they made judo jackets that large. Of course, Jumbo Tsuruta going to be back headlining the show once again, one-on-one this time against the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Jack Briscoe. So many people. I posted some pictures. I teased it on social media. So many people interested in that one.
I thought you were going to tease his match against Irish Mickey Doyle. Isn't that also on this episode?
Also on this episode. That's right. A little wet your taste buds. Earlier in the episode, we're going to see Irish Mickey Doyle come to town to take on Jumbo Tsuruta as he prepares for his big match up to close the next video cast. Jack Briscoe defending his world title against Jumbo. Again, just months into the business and holding his own against the world champion. Right there, you guys got to see it to believe it.
Yeah, I cannot explain it to you. You have to see it with your own eyes. You have to watch it. You have to get this video cast and watch it with us. Jumbo was a prodigy. I cannot think of another wrestler who started off so fast with his ability, the way he sold, the way he played to the crowd. It is a joy to watch. This stuff is over 50 years old. This footage is over 50 years old, almost older than me. And the only way you're going to get it is if you're a VIP superfan on the Patreon.
That's it. And speaking of the Patreon, I also got to put over Dan's show notes here. I talk about my insanely detailed show notes, but this current episode you guys are listening to right now, 70 pages of show notes right there. at your fingertips if you guys subscribe today at the VIP Superfan tier. Check them out, the Puro Academy Episode 12 show notes, looking at 1961, which is what we're about to do, Dan, as we look at those keynotes you were talking about just a little bit ago. Obviously, we're going to be taking a deep look into the early booking of one giant Baba, Antonio Inoki, and even Kintaro Oki here, who is sometimes referred to as the forgotten third student of Rikidozan.
Well, based on some of the results I see for this year and how well he does and how many wins he gets, I'm not sure how forgotten he is. And you're going to see Kintaro Oki wrestling for both All Japan and New Japan in the future as time goes on. He is a major player in the world of pro wrestling, and we're going to get to follow him from the very beginnings, along with Inoki and Baba. I don't want to give it away too early, but I feel like we're going to be having a storyline in another year or two of another three-headed snake in the world of Japanese professional wrestling. I'm just thinking about it now as we're talking about it, and I say we might have another three-headed snake.
Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I am looking forward to that one as we continue on. We'll also see this year, 1961, there's going to be a constant flow, a nonstop flow of professional wrestling here. No summers off, no falls off, things of that nature. Tons of action throughout the entire year. We'll even dive a little bit into the outlaw promotions, if you will, the non-JWA running promotions here, running in little small areas of the country of Japan, and what Rikidozan did at this point to help them in the early goings before changing his feelings about helping them in 1962. The Little People are returning to Japan for their second and third tours here, working with the All Japan Women's promotion. Also, the Great Antonio comes to Japan. Quite the spectacle he is. But when he begins to believe his own hype, Dan, he's soundly put in his place repeatedly.
Yeah, everybody's tough until they have to face more than one human. I don't care how strong or tough you are. We'll get into plenty of stuff about Great Antonio. And there were some rumors that I had heard long ago about some other things he might have pulled, but they were not in the book. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to speak about it because it's a little scurrilous. This guy is certainly an attraction, and we can talk about it, and there'll be video footage of him available. Search this guy on the internet. He is an interesting character, or was an interesting character. Mentioning the tours, just back on the tours real quick. In prior years, we would have disparate tours that would last a certain amount of time with gaps in between. This year is kind of crazy because some of these tours overlap and it's just never ending. I don't even know why they bother calling them different tours.
Right.
This promotion just runs and runs and runs. Rikidozan's got this thing up and running and generating revenue, and he wants to run. It seems as if he wants to run as many shows as he can.
Yeah, and it looks like Rikidozan going to leave here for a few weeks throughout the year, but he's not really missed this time around because there's so much talent here, a lot of things going on, including we're going to be talking about the third annual World League Tournament coming in the month of May, going to take place 44 cards over 2 months, May and June. We're going to see the likes of just some of the guest foreigners coming in, Mr. X, which is the hooded Bill Miller, also Ronnie Etchinson, Hercules Cortez, Great Togo, and Tosh Togo, of course, Harold Sakata, and one Carl Krauser, a.k.a. Carl Gotch.
Fantastic. Carl Gotch, a huge fan of Carl Gotch. I have a DVD that was released in Japan of his that has an interview and him talking about his style. And they have, I believe it's handycam or recorded footage of a match of his from 1961, his very first tour. I think it's against Yoshimura. And it is amazing what this guy's doing in 1961. And even at that age, he wasn't very young at that point. He was still, I think, maybe in his 40s. But you should see this guy go. Carl Gotch finally being introduced to the world of Japanese professional wrestling, and you're going to learn how important he becomes as time goes by.
Yeah, how important indeed. I mean, that's an understatement. I can't wait to talk more about Carl Gotch this episode and beyond, but we're also going to be taking a look at a ton of title defenses, more than usual here in 1961. The All-Asia Tag Team titles on the line, the All-Asia Heavyweight title on the line, and the International Heavyweight title all on the line, and all defended this year by the one and only Rikidozan, of course, champion of all those belts. From there, we're going to move on into the summer as July comes to an end. Another tour begins August through November. This tour, as we've seen before in the fall, a lot of the lesser-known talents being brought in for that one, but we will also see the Zebra Kid, the arch nemesis of Rikidozan back in Hawaii, if you guys remember that several episodes back.
Yep, you're going to see some interesting cards, and it's a 4-month tour. That's how crazy it is now. 1961, a big, big year for the JWA. And one of the other things we'll be able to show you, remember before we were talking about TV results and how important it was because that's how the majority of the fans perceive the wrestlers. Mm-hmm. You're going to see Baba and Inoki ending up on TV this year, and we're going to be paying strict attention to how they're being portrayed on these TV tapings because that's going to shape the opinion of the viewers on, are these guys legit? Should I really care about them or not? And you're going to be hearing more about that later on.
All right, so I'm not sure how deep we're going to get into this one. It's a lot of things going on in 61. If we can crank it all out, so be it. But if not, I can promise you guys one thing. Dan, in the very first night of the tour here in January, we're going to witness an unmasking. The very first night. What a way to kick off the new year. Not since Mr. Atomic have I been this excited.
Unmaskings are always interesting. They aren't always necessarily good, but they're always interesting. And there is actually eyewitness report from either the television show or actually in attendance at the wrestling show from someone who was there. And he stated his opinion on what he thought about the unmasking.
Looking forward to that. Well, that unmasking at the beginning of the year, not going to be outdone near the end of the year where we will see no less than 3 more unmaskings here in the JWA. Talk about overkill. Plus, Rikidozan looking to get into promoting boxing, perhaps, creating a new venue for the wrestling TV program. The one he has now, he feels it's too small. And by the end of the year, we'll see the likes of Aldo Bogny, Luther Lindsay, Rocky Hamilton, and former Oakland Raider turned pro wrestler, Don Manukian.
That's what we've got coming up. It's going to be an exciting episode. But before we can get started, you guys know the rules. Is everyone in their seats? Is everyone ready? Because at this point, class is in session.
All right, here we go.
So we're going to start off. The beginning of the year is an 18-card tour called the International Competition of the Spring, starting in January, ending in early February.
Spring. I got my months mixed
up. That is strange. It does say spring, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Who am I to doubt El Dandy? I don't know.
So our guest foreigners, as they're termed, is Lord James Blears, Lucky Siminovich, Dutchman, and Sardara Singh. So we've got 4 big outsiders, which means that of these 10 match cards, 90% of it is going to be the local boys. And then the top 2 matches, maybe 3 matches, are going to involve the outsiders. And as we roll through this tour, I'm paying more attention to the actual drawing. And we're getting the first show of the year with 10,000 packed to capacity. But in this very first show is our first gun masking. Just right off the bat. It didn't take long. He ended up unmasking before the match. This would be the main event for the television show as well. And I'm just going to read from that fantastic Rikidozan Years Wrestling History book that is available on Amazon. If you are a fan of Japanese wrestling, you should get that for yourself. It's a great read.
So let's set the stage. The match itself is Rikidozan and Toyonobori taking on Lucky Siminovich and a guy by the name of Mr. X.
Mr. X. Yeah, that's exactly what he was phrased as.
Put a lot of thought into that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, didn't they use Mr. X in AWA as well?
Dr. X. He was a doctor.
Dr. X, thank you. Oh, well, he finished school finally.
He did.
So Mr. X shows up and unmasks himself before the match even started. So that was strange. And the people who saw that happen were left to wonder why the heck they did it that way. And the only guess they had was that the wrestler who was masked, which we would find out is Lord James Blears, who had already been to Japan, didn't think his persona was strong enough to convince people to buy a ticket. It wasn't a strong enough gimmick. The other thing with being a masked wrestler who people have already seen without a mask is your style and your look are going to be similar. And if these guys are good fans, they're going to know who you are before you even start. So that's the speculation on why he unmasked before the match even started, just because he didn't think it was going to work. Now, there is a story that has been related from someone who was actually there and saw it happen. And he said that what Lord James Blears did by unmasking as Mr. X left the audience cold. They didn't react at all about it. So without any buildup, no one reacts. I don't think that's a hard concept to understand in the world of wrestling or any other performance. If you don't build it up, who's going to care?
I was going to say, let me get this straight. So Lord James Blears, who by all accounts was a great heel gimmick in the States and otherwise, but Lord James Blears comes over to Japan. He feels like he's not really getting over. His gimmick's not really working over here in Japan, so he decides, I'm going to reinvent myself, put a mask on. He clearly comes to ringside, gets no response as Mr. X, so he calls an audible and unmasks himself, but the crowd still doesn't react, so he's just not working here. I'm curious to see how many tours he does, and I'm not trying to knock James Blears. He was a huge name in his era. It's just something's going on here in Japan with the character, and he didn't feel like it was enough. He tries to don the mask, and that doesn't work either. He unmasks, and still nothing.
It's not the only audible they called. If you notice, or we'll let you know, if you had the insanely detailed show notes, you'd see that Lord James Blears and Lucky Siminovich were billed as the Hawaiian Tag Team champs, even though the champs are really Lou Newman and Tom Rice. And Blears and Siminovich had technically held the tag belts at one time or another, but never as a team themselves. They were always teamed with other people. So not only did they just come up with a gimmick with a mask, they just made up everything and then they blew that up, but they still came in as fake champions. So it's a mass hysteria already to start the year in 1961.
Well, creative licensing mixed with the fact that we're decades away from the internet, Dan. I guess they thought they could get away with it. And they did until now.
They sure did. They thought they could get away with it. 63 years later, we have you nailed, sir. Nice try. We'll progress through the tour with anything of note. They're drawing good houses, often packed to capacity. Sometimes we won't even have the actual attendance, but it will say packed to capacity, 7,000, 6,000. One note I have is from the January 20th show, I wanted to say, on the Friday night TV show that aired at 8 o'clock. The first match on the show was Shohei Giant Baba and Yukio Suzuki fighting the forces of Yoshinosato and Takeo Kaneko.
Yeah, Giant Baba making TV there.
That's correct. And they wrestled to a time limit draw. So that was a 45-minute match. So you probably got a portion of that match on the show because the main event ran almost a half hour itself.
Right. Yeah.
But Baba's on TV and he doesn't lose. And we're seeing him in a draw with Yoshinosato, who the fans already know from television. So this is a good thing for Baba, getting some exposure and being in a tag match where he doesn't have to run the show himself and he doesn't have to rely totally on himself. You've got other things to watch. So this is the way you bring a guy up at this point in his career.
And, I'll say this too for everybody interested out there in the results. We're not going to go through the results, but I will say 90% of the cards, if not more, feature the main event of Rikidozan and Toyonobori versus Lord James Blears and Lucky Siminovich. So you guys aren't missing a whole lot by us skipping the results there. It's almost the same tag team match every night. Not every night, but almost every night of this entire tour.
Yeah, and they're not even title matches. They go out of their way to say it's a non-title match. And I don't know if that's because the title didn't exist. There was no title to have. I don't know if they even had belts. Oftentimes, the Hawaiian tag title would never be up for grabs because I don't even think they had belts for him. When it was the All-Asia Tag Team Championship, well, at least Rikidozan's got those belts.
So as we scroll along through the results here for this first tour of the year, January-February timeframe, the three-headed snake that may come to exist one day here, talking about Inoki, Baba, and Kintaro Oki is who I assume you're referring to, the third head of the snake being at this point in time. They're out here working the mid-card, the undercard, a whole bunch. And I noticed Baba going over, Baba going to some draws, Kintaro Oki going over, Kintaro Oki going to some draws. But it only appears that Antonio Inoki gets maybe 2 wins. I know for sure one that I noticed, but at the most, Antonio Inoki scoring 2 victories out of the entire tour. So certainly lagging behind both Baba and Oki at this point.
Yeah, he is the youngest. I'll say that. He isn't a 6'10" giant, and Kintaro Oki has a distinct look even at that age. From a promoter's point of view, of the three, you're pushing Baba first no matter what. Oki is a little longer in the tooth, I think. I have to verify that, but he always looked older than me.
Yeah, I think he was 32 here in 61.
Well, yeah, 32 compared to 20. So if you want to try to make money off of Oki, you better start now because he's not young.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got all the time in the world with Inoki. You can bring him up like you want to bring him up. You can take your time with a child who probably isn't ready from a number of angles to being a superstar because he's just too young. He doesn't have the time in. Didn't have the experience. And Kanji Inoki is being a curtain jerker in the first match or second match on a lot of these cards in the first tour. And I don't know if he's upset about it or not, but he has to understand he's the third of the three at this point, because that's what makes sense. The 32-year-old Kintaro Oki, if you don't start pushing him now, when are you going to start?
Yeah. Let me get your take on something else here in this specific tour, Dan. I've noticed a lot in the semi-main events. It's Kokichi Endo scoring wins, 2 straight falls over Oki, over Baba. There's nights where it's a handicap match where Kokichi Endo has to wrestle both Oki and Baba back to back, and he defeats them both by pinfall, by submission. No funny shenanigans, just straight up wins here in fairly lengthy matches, 15-minute matches, 13-minute matches. I wanted to get your take on this. Is this Rikidozan booking these matches to, I don't know, help out his good buddy Kokichi Endo, who's done so much for him at this point in time? Or is this more Rikidozan putting these guys in there with Endo to learn from?
I'm leaning towards the learning part, because Kokichi Endo has always been Baba's right-hand man. Even with the rise of Toyonobori, he learned he really couldn't trust him that much. So Kokichi Endo is the only guy that Rikidozan probably can really trust. Mm-hmm. And he's putting Oki and Baba against him because he needs them seasoned. He needs them to learn, and getting to be in the 6th or 7th match of a 10-match show or a 9-match show, that's almost in the main event. That's almost in the semi-main. So they're right up on the cusp of being a high-profile match, and Kokichi Endo is probably the best guy to help them learn how to perform well at that level. Okay. And I'll keep my eyes open to see if he gets a shot against Inoki, just to have Inoki get a little bit of some experience against Kokichi Endo, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, fair enough.
One card I'm noticing in Osaka City on February 1st, attendance of 10,000 or 11,000, regardless, packed to capacity. We actually have a real title match for the JWA All-Asian Tag Team and Hawaii Tag Team Championship. Best out of 3 falls. And in this one, Rikidozan and Toyonobori retain the All-Asian Tag Team title in its 5th defense, defeating the team of, as we mentioned most already, Lord James Blears and Lucky Siminovich.
Yeah, and I think the third fall was DQ, if I remember reading that correctly earlier. So that's why no titles exchanged hands there, because it was announced as title for title.
Correct. Yeah, Siminovich pinned Rikidozan in 14-12, so Rikidozan's taking a pin. Rikidozan gets revenge, but against Blears 9 minutes later. And then the third fall is Siminovich defeating Rikidozan, but by DQ at 4 minutes, 39 seconds.
So the Hawaiian tag team champions go over here. Okay, that's cool.
Yep, but with the DQ, I don't think the title changes hands.
No.
So that's your problem.
I'm scrolling ahead here to the third. It looks like our very first, and I don't know if you saw this or not, Rikidozan's very first singles match of the tour.
I didn't notice it as a singles match, but I agree with you. It's a best out of 3 falls, 60-minute time limit, non-title, referee Yusef Turco, NWA International Heavyweight and JWA All-Asia Heavyweight Champion Rikidozan defeats Lucky Siminovich 2 straight falls, DQ at 10 minutes, and KO at 2 minutes, 23 seconds. So that entire match is going to be on the bi-weekly TV show. We do have another tag championship match February 5th. That's Rikidozan Toyonobori, Lord James Blears, Lucky Siminovich. But this time it's 2 straight falls. Rikidozan gets the first one. Toyonobori gets the second when the referee stops the match in 7 minutes, 16 seconds of the second fall. 2 straight falls. They retain their title. That counts as the 6th defense of the All-Asia Tag Team Championship. That ends that first tour. So 12 days after that tour ended, a live TV event was held. Rikidozan acted as the referee for the main event, and Toyonobori had a singles match against Lucky Siminovich, who had remained from the prior series. And in the semifinal, there was a rare 6-man tag match between the Japanese camps held in a best-of-3 format. So let's see what those words mean. The best of 3 falls was Kokichi Endo and Mammoth Suzuki and Yusef Turco on one side against Yoshinosato, Isao Yoshiwara, and Takeo Kaneko. So that's interesting. The semi-main has all natives. In fact, there's only one outsider that stuck around. The other 3 left at the end of the tour. So the main event was the only one, and that had Lucky Siminovich. And that was televised. So we move on to March. Look, we're moving along. This is going to be fine. March 3rd, there was another televised event, and this one was titled Rikidozan Send-Off Pro Wrestling Match for America. And the main event was a battle royal with 6 participants. Rikidozan, Toyonobori, Kokichi Endo, Yoshinosato, Nagasawa, and Tosano Hana?
Not familiar with that one.
Me neither. That's a new one for me. I don't know why they're pushing that guy when they've got Baba and Inoki.
Well, they got to have somebody go out of the battle royal first.
Well, that's true. I guess they can't. I guess they can't lose if they don't participate in it. But in this battle royal, Rikidozan was the second guy eliminated, and he wouldn't be back until May 1st for the Third World League. So at this point, Rikidozan's taking off for a little while. He's got a lot of business stuff to do, probably setting up the final negotiations for who's going to be in the Third World League. So from March 3rd to May 1st, we're not going to have Rikidozan on any of these cards coming up. So we'll go through this. Let's see if anybody's exciting in here. I'm not seeing much. The only thing I'm seeing here that's interesting is on March 3rd, we've got another Baba appearance on TV. He's in a tag match again. And in this one, so Baba's going to another draw on TV, which is better than a loss, but it's not as awesome as a win. And that's really it. They had a couple shows in March, and then they go quiet for a little while. But that doesn't mean that their guys aren't working. There is a Little People series, as referenced by Ray earlier, from the end of March to the end of April in 1961. So when the JWA came into the Matsusaka City territory or any nearby cities in the middle of Japan, there was a guy who acted as the frontman promoter for Rikidozan named Tamai. And when Yoshio Kodama invited 6 Little People to Japan for the second tour, because we had mentioned the first tour last year, Rikidozan lent them some of the JWA wrestlers to make up for a shortage of wrestlers on their cards, because he was indebted to Tamai for his promotional help when he would go to the Matsusaka City area with the JWA. So he handed off a few of his wrestlers to help fill out their cards.
And this is what the NWA in the States would call an outlaw promotion of sorts, but Rikidozan working loosely with this character.
Yeah, he was doing them a favor, and they're running a different kind of pro wrestling. I think it had been stated before that Rikidozan was not interested in Little People on his cards or women. So in the arena program for this Little Person tour, the English translation of the promotion's name is, quote, Nippon Midget Pro Wrestling Promotions. The Little People were billed in Japanese newspapers as Kobito, which is the Japanese word for midgets. But in 1962, this would be the only time he does it. Rikidozan puts an end to the practice of letting the wrestlers out to those shows because he didn't like to book female wrestlers or midgets on the JWA cards. He wanted people to differentiate his product from the other promotions. He always thought women and midgets were kind of spectacle elements to a show as opposed to real wrestlers. And he wanted people to think the JWA wrestlers fought in earnest with a small amount of showmanship included now and then. And right there, that phrase right there encapsulates so much of what Japanese wrestling is and has been for the longest time. The wrestlers fight in earnest with a small amount of showmanship included now and then. It's about the fight in the ring, the legitimate battle in the ring with just enough showmanship to keep the fans engaged. And maybe that's why the fans have been conditioned in Japan to react the way they do from a crowd point of view.
And I guess this little territory, if you will, in Matsusaka City, that would be more like the DDT promotion over there.
Yeah, there were so many small promotions. Oh my gosh, if we ever make it to the 90s, and I don't see why we won't, this show's going to explode. There's so many of these tiny promotions to follow. It's very interesting, but you have, again, wrestling is like ice cream, and there's a flavor for everybody's taste.
I don't know what flavor Kin the Box is, but I can't wait to get there.
Cardboard flavor? I don't know. So Rikidozan not wanting to book the midgets or the females was the reason why Tamai formed his own promotion. He booked both of them, and when he had trouble filling out the roster, he would book mixed tag team matches. The Little People disappeared from TV, but would continue to work on the undercard of All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling shows. Oh gosh, we have a whole lot to cover. Wait till you get into that.
Oh yeah.
They would be a mainstay on the undercard of a lot of the major All Japan Women's shows. And some of their matches are some of them are very good from a technical point of view, but some of them absolutely hilarious as well. And we'll get a chance to see those. They'll probably show up on a video cast someday.
Looking forward to it.
Ironically, many little people and their supporters claim that those do-gooders robbed them of their ability to make a living. And that makes sense. The people who were concerned that they were being exploited never really thought that these people were making money off of these performances. It's not like they were slaves or anything. So when you fight for their ability not to be exploited that way, now that loses their revenue stream for them.
Right. Looking at some of the names here, these were the who's who of that era. Specifically, I see Little Beaver and Skylo Low on the card. And yes, guys, the same Little Beaver that gets smashed by King Kong Bundy at WrestleMania 3. He was wrestling all the way back here in 1961. So do the math. Think about how old he was when he was getting crunched there by Bundy, and even later on by the Gang as well on some of the house shows. But I'm looking at Cowboy Red Taylor, Billy the Kid, Tom Thumb, clever name, Pee Wee James, Little Beaver, and Skylo Low working the tour here. And I guess this is the spring of 1961.
Yeah, now we made it to March 26th. That's legally spring, isn't it? December, January, February. Yep, you're in spring.
According to my Google machine, by the way, Dan, spring in Japan is like spring in America. It's March to May-ish. Just wanted to verify.
All right, so they just didn't get the name right of their tour, and I'm going to hold that against them, I think. But we've all seen Billy the Kid. If you've seen the best of WWF or biggest, strongest, strongest, I think they end up in their wrestling strangest matches. I can't remember which tape, but I definitely remember seeing several midget matches.
Oh, yeah, they're in a few of them. Yeah, I just covered a few of them on one of the Coliseum video casts over on our Patreon. But yeah, I believe there are a few on the biggest, smallest, strangest, strongest.
So on some of these shows, you'll have Yoshinosato, Yusuf Turk, Nagasawa, Otsubo, Yoshihara, all wrestling. And then the semi-main and the main event will be the midgets. And this would go on several times, but the midgets were always in the main event, and the build-up to those matches were the local guys. And this would go on all the way through to the end of April. And we make it to April 23rd. There's a show that I want to make mention of. Mm-hmm. The title of the show, because this is, if you remember from 1954, all these shows have to have long drawn-out titles. This one's called the Yasukuni Shrine Annual Festival Dedication Pro Wrestling Show, and that was held at a shrine in Tokyo, and it wasn't a Japanese pro wrestling event, but many of its wrestlers participated, including Rikidozan. So now we know his first show back for JWA was May 1st, but he was back in Japan by April 23rd.
Right.
He participated as a special referee. There were two wrestlers from Dwarf Pro Wrestling, which was held at the same time. And after fighting each other in singles matches, Giant Baba and Kintaro Oki teamed up to participate in the main event of the day. So you're getting double duty out of the two newcomers that are getting pushed really strong in 1961, Baba and Oki.
And on the same card, Inoki doing a job in the third fall in the show, just to put some context here.
Yeah, he lost to Masakatsu Tanaka, inside cradle, 13 minutes, 42 seconds. So I guess the only good part about that is he got 13 minutes of work in the ring to hone his craft, as it were.
Well, this has to be uncomfortable because we have Baba over Oki on the show, and then they turn around and they team up later in the evening.
And not only late in the evening, they're in the main event.
Right, yes.
So these guys, that's their first official main event, although it's not a JWA show, so I guess that's a qualifier, but I can't imagine that qualifier makes Antonio Inoki feel any better. Or, I'm sorry, Kanji Inoki. His name would not change for another year, and we'll get to that when we cover 1962. But Kanji Inoki, I can't imagine him being excited watching the two guys that he started pretty much at the same time with being pushed to the main event already, and he is in the third match of the show.
Right.
Now, regarding the booking that was going on for the JWA, Great Togo was doing most of the booking, getting the outsiders, whether they're from America or Europe, to come for the tours for Rikidozan. And Great Togo was being paid, and I think, have we discovered if he's skimming yet or not, or will we find that out in the future? I think every, quote, booker who brings talent in is somehow skimming off the top of the fees. We'll find out soon enough. Either way, he does a really good job for Rikidozan here because he brings the 6'4", 400-pound Great Antonio to Japan. And there is something of a scene when he arrives at the Haneda airport at midnight on April 27th, he shows up with Togo and Mr. X, another Mr. X.
That's Bill Miller this time.
Yeah, there's so many Mr. X's. And as soon as he shakes hands with Rikidozan, Antonio starts to play the role of his gimmick, a monstrous creature. And the fans are scattering, reporters are scattering, and he's growling and lifting up heavy chairs. And it is said that his violent behavior resulted in sensational articles written in newspapers, which I'm not surprised by. This is called a great angle. You have this absolute monster who he hasn't even started doing feats of strength yet. This is just the beginning. Great Togo this is something of a coup to be able to bring somebody like this that's going to attract that much attention to an already successful promotion. This promotion is doing very well right now, and this is just elevating it to a new level.
Well, I'm sure the Japanese fans had never seen anything like the great Antonio. He was certainly a spectacle of spectacles at this point in time.
I don't know how anyone has, wherever this guy goes, I don't think anyone had ever seen anything like him. And he looked like a total, I don't even know, a creature, a monster, really. Mm-hmm. So the next day, after all these newspaper articles come out, Great Antonio gives a demonstration of his strength by pulling 4 loaded 2-ton city buses in Tokyo, which is a huge strongman gimmick. Sometimes you use the ropes, and some people do it with their mouth, where they'll somehow get a rope in their mouth and they'll be able to pull. It's an impressive feat of strength, and Great Antonio at this age can still pull it off. And he couldn't move the buses over a long distance as the crowd thought he was going to do. But regardless, the fact he could move the buses at all was outlandish to the Japanese fans. And the press coverage was just flooding in on this freak of nature being in Japan and ostensibly going to be wrestling Rikidozan. We had said that the midget tour was running from late March to late April. Mm-hmm. At the very last show of that tour on April 28, 1961, the Great Antonio appeared at it, and Togo led him to the ring with a length of chain around his neck, which if you get to see the video or YouTube it or watch us when eventually we cover it on the video cast, he will come to the ring with a huge chain on his neck as if he's being led by his manager. Like, again, a wild man.
Yeah, one of the original wild men, at least the tour of Japan anyway.
Yep, and then Great Antonio acted as if he had gone crazy, and he lifted the ring announcer off his feet and then tried to attack Rikidozan. So now we're seeing a full-blown angle being promoted on the midget tour because Rikidozan was sitting at ringside as a TV commentator. And this contributed greatly to an increase in the number of people who bought tickets the following week. In many cases, the Great Antonio faced several mid-level wrestlers in handicap matches to show up his superhuman strength. So this is something that we can take a little bit of a focus on the next tour, which just so happens to be the 3rd Annual World League.
There we go.
There's so much to talk about. You had already mentioned most of the participants, but the new Mr. X is Bill Miller this time. The Great Antonio's in. Carl Krauser, otherwise known as Carl Gotch, is there. Ike Eakins, Ronnie Etchinson, Hercules Romero, or Hercules Cortez, however you prefer. Jim Wright, Great Togo, booking and working. What a great deal. He's making money hand over fist. Mm-hmm. And Tosh Togo, who's been here several times over the years, back, Harold Sakata, Tosh Togo.
A.K.A. Odd Job.
Odd Job, that's right. Odd Job from the, James Bond movies. So this is the biggest World League yet. We went from, what was it? It wasn't too many cards the first time. And I think it went to 32.
Yep.
And now we're at 44 cards, and it's going to take us almost 2 complete months. It's from May 1st all the way to June 29th. So 2 months, 44 cards. They're squeezing this and milking this concept of the World League to get as much money as possible out of it. And right off the bat, they start with a show that is packed to capacity. I'm not going to go through any of the results here without picking out something of interest because it's just a million league matches between what appears to be 9 outsiders and 9 insiders. We get to see right off the bat, though, Carl Gotch, wrestled Michiaki Yoshimura, who was probably the best worker of the time in the promotion, to a draw in 45 minutes. My recollection is this is the match that shows up on the Carl Gotch DVD.
Okay.
And it's not all of it, but it's a good chunk of it. And it's really nice work. But we'll cruise through these World Leagues just to see who is showing up and who's performing well. And I know that there's some single matches sprinkled into this tournament. And there's a couple times as a promotional match. Somebody will wrestle another person a second time, even though it's not a tournament match. It's just more of an exhibition.
Filling out the card.
Yeah. I mean, filling out the card. There's already 11 matches on each of these. So the World League's a really neat concept, and when you bring that many outsiders, the people who are paying money for a ticket, they're definitely getting their money's worth because there are a lot of matches, a lot of singles matches, and with these tournaments held at this point, you were getting conclusive finishes on almost all the shows. It wasn't just DQ and draw manias.
I can't find, because there's so many results, as you said, I think 44 cards over 2 months here, and I can't find the specific date, the specific where it's at here in this tour. But I have a little note here that you posted in the middle of the results, and I wanted to read this. Maybe you can find it and elaborate a little further. But the note reads, it was reported that more than 36,000 fans came to see the outdoor show at Ayamagaki Park. I apologize if I butchered that, guys. But apparently the president of Gong Magazine, Kazuki Takeuchi, stated that the venue was not large enough to hold 36,000 people. So they doubt the figure that was reported in the newspapers. They think it was more closer to 25,000. And as it states here in the notes, no doubt it was another case of a promoter, a wrestling promoter, inflating the true figure. Talking about WrestleMania 3, Dan, there, huh?
Yeah, a little bit to it. Isn't it funny that it's the third World League and we're seeing behavior that's very similar to Vince's behavior with the third WrestleMania? The more things change, the more they stay the same. There is that additional funny story that goes with it. The park had a neighboring hill. So perhaps the promoter calculated that 11,000 people were crowded up on that hill and watched the show for free.
I always love watching old videos on YouTube and things of fans that could see into ballparks back in the day, and they would climb up in trees or on their roofs, and they were able to watch games all season long. That would be a great time.
Yeah, when my brother was living in the Boston area, he was so close on Queensbury Street that we could almost see into Fenway Park.
Oh, wow.
And watch Red Sox games. And I figured if we were like 3 streets over, there were people who could actually do it. And imagine that would be worth paying rent in order just to go up to the roof and watch baseball games whenever you wanted.
Well, if you were a Red Sox fan, that is.
Good point. Well, it was tough being a Red Sox fan for a long time. I want to let everybody know I suffered not as much as some people did, but more than most.
Mm-hmm.
More than most.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out, the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen, if you know what's good for you.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnetty. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com, and to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
All right, let's see. We made it through May, the beginning couple weeks of May. We do have a non-title match with Rikidozan versus Mr. X on May 12th episode. Lots of league matches, so many league matches happening. And this one's on May 23rd. So almost halfway through this tour. It started in the beginning of May. We make it to the end of May. And in the main event, we have an NWA International Heavyweight Championship match. Best of 3 falls, no time limit. Rikidozan wrestles Mr. X to a draw to retain the title. That would be Rikidozan's 10th defense. And this was just for the NWA International Championship. The All Asia Heavyweight title was not on the line. First fall, Mr. X pins Rikidozan at 9 minutes. Second fall, Rikidozan gets Mr. X. And a minute and 44 seconds after that, they go to a double count out of the ring.
Talking about an easy night here.
Easy night for him, and he earns it. He deserves it. Poor guy. Rikidozan's working hard trying to promote this WrestleMania 3, or in his case, Third World League.
Yeah, World League 3. Sure.
So the great Antonio, who's in all these shows, has started getting an idea that he is doing more than his fair share for bringing in all the fans for this tour, because he made such a big splash coming into it. Oh, so he started getting an attitude, talking about he's the reason why everybody's coming. And I have never heard anyone say that he was fun to be around in general. So he was kind of a jerk. And some of the other 1,000 guys that were brought in for this tour were getting tired of his act. And on May 18th in Ube, Ike Eakins decided to teach him a lesson in humility and punished him in the ring by beating him with his fists. The night before that in Osaka, Hercules Romero stretched Antonio during their match. And on this particular night in Okayama, which was, I said it already, it's the 23rd, Bill Miller and Carl Gotch joined Ike Eakins to give Antonio another sound thrashing, but this time it was in the dressing room.
Oh, man.
So when you're beating up one of your own wrestler mates on the tour with 3-on-1, they were definitely tired of his crap at that point. And I don't know what exactly he did to earn that, but he probably earned it for sure.
Well, it doesn't end there either. I mean, he's going to be, well, we'll see what happens with him in a little bit here.
Yeah, it continues because one report said that Rikidozan and Togo overlooked their behavior because Antonio had boasted of his popularity and was becoming selfish, demanding more money because he felt like he was the show and he was the reason everybody was there. Then he was complaining about the food. He was drinking too much. He was being a bother to everyone. And Rikidozan was aware that Gotch and Miller were going to punish him. And Rikidozan asked him to stop short of injuring him because he was going to wrestle him in Tokyo on June 2nd. So he says, yeah, you can beat him up, but don't injure him because I'm going to make a payday against this guy on June 2nd.
Don't maim him.
So regarding Gotch and Miller, who were both, well, Gotch was, I don't even know if double tough is the right word. He was a shooter. He was a hooker. There's a lot between Carl Gotch and Luthez. Luthez has strong opinions about Carl Gotch in his book. Research both those guys. It's so interesting to see that side of pro wrestling where it's taken almost as a legitimate shoot with the way they wrestle. Regardless, Gotch and Miller would repeat their actions 15 months later in Columbus, Ohio, but a different victim, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Here you go, a little United States wrestling history. Shortly before Buddy Rogers went out to wrestle Johnny Barron, Gotch and Miller roughed him up in the dressing room and slammed a door in his arm. Rogers wasn't able to wrestle in the scheduled main event, and the promoter had to refund almost half of the gate. That time, Buddy Rogers filed assault and battery charges against his assailants, and the incident made national headlines.
I wonder how well that went over with the wrestling. Al Haft, one of the original promoters there, Columbus, Ohio, one of the biggest territories of the time back in the 50s, 60s. And it's kind of funny to see a wrestler filing a lawsuit about getting attacked and injured by another wrestler. So you have some people wondering, well, I thought this was a work, so is this a work? You have other people going, wait a minute, I thought this was real. And if it's real, why should you be shocked that guys are attacking you?
Yeah, far be it from me to disparage Buddy Rogers, but when I heard that he filed an assault and battery charge against these guys, it made me immediately think of the boy toy.
Shawn Michaels?
Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels is kind of Weasley, never drops a title. This is the kind of thing Shawn Michaels would do. If he got beat up in the dressing room, I feel like he's the guy who would file charges. I did hear another rumor about this particular meeting was that it was more of Buddy Rogers trying to sneak into the promotion with his own group of guys and kind of take over as he was prone to do.
Buddy, yeah, he had a tendency of bringing his guys with him, that's for sure.
Anyway, it's funny that I got a Shawn Michaels vibe off of reading this story. I don't know why.
No 9 thugs in Syracuse, though.
No, yeah, 9 thugs. It only takes one guy who's not drunk out of his mind can take out most of these guys when they're partying hard, and they certainly partied hard back in those days. So other than that event, we move on to more of the TV, and we had a main event on the show from May 26th with Rikidozan versus Carl Gotch or Carl Krauser. So wouldn't it be great if they actually had that? Unfortunately, it's a live broadcast, so that wouldn't require it to be taped at all. But maybe it was. I'd love to see that if it actually exists.
Oh, for certain.
We make it to the end of May. Nothing outstanding. Although there is a report in the beginning of June from Haruyo Yamaguchi. Haruyo Yamaguchi is one of the big Japanese wrestling historians that are out there. And he was 12 years old when he first saw the great Antonio on TV. He was much too young to realize that Bill Miller was actually a better wrestler. But at that point, you're looking at the spectacle, certainly in his age.
Right.
And Haruo Yamaguchi actually saved a lot of the newspaper articles about Great Antonio's stay in Japan. But there was an article, and there was a rough translation, said that Antonio asked the head of a Tokyo film company to film his match on June 2nd in Tokyo. They agreed, but when they delivered the film to Antonio, he refused to pay the agreed-upon fee.
Wow, what a scumbag this Antonio is.
Yeah, what a scammer. He tried to convince the producer that instead of payment, they could make money on the film and distribution. Antonio's action angered the producer, and that's all the information that this guy had. But that doesn't surprise me with everything else we've heard about Great Antonio. For him to scam somebody and say, no, come in and tape it. I'll pay for it. So they come in and they film the match. And then when they wanted his money, he goes, no, I don't have any money, but you can distribute it.
It was funny to read Yamaguchi's look at things at 12 years old during this time period, seeing the Great Antonio and his presence in the ring, the craziness going on. He didn't realize that Bill Miller was the far better wrestler, but he was infatuated with the Great Antonio because here was this larger-than-life monster, and that kind of takes me back to my childhood, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. I was a fan of Ricky Steamboat. Hell of a wrestler, Dan, I have to say, but I was a huge fan of the Ultimate Warrior at the same time because it's the spectacle as a kid.
That entrance was hard to beat, and the crowd went absolutely ballistic. Everyone can claim, like revisionist history, that they didn't care that much, and they all thought he sucked forever. But that's not how the fans reacted, and it's all on tape. You can see it. I was a little bit older than you, so I was not as interested. I'd already seen like the steroid phase come through wrestling, and I'd seen too many guys like the Warlord, Vladimir Pietrov, like huge jacked up guys that could do nothing. Yeah. And I was like, I get it. They're super strong, but if they can't do anything in the ring and they're not charismatic, then what do we have? On Ultimate Warrior side, for a guy that I never heard a cogent interview from him, he had, I don't even know if it was charisma. I don't know what it was. It was like rock star stuff. It was like, I don't know how to describe it. People wanted to see him. Yeah. And guys like Rick Rude and was it Ted DiBiase? There are guys that actually got good matches out of him, but it took a lot of work. And I think the reason why Rick Rude was able to get good matches out of him is because he worked with him when he was back in
Dallas
World Class in Dallas as the Dingo Warrior. So maybe because of that, he was able to communicate with him and didn't think that Rude was trying to screw him. Or I'm not sure why Warrior did Warrior things. No one knows why. But
do you ever think we'd be talking about the Ultimate Warrior here on a Japanese wrestling podcast? I don't know.
Maybe he was born in 1961 because he started in 84 with Team USA, Power Team USA, and he might have been born in 1961. So there might be a correlation, a very weak one. Anyway, that's your Ultimate Warrior segment of the show. Let's keep moving on. June 2nd, we made it. We made it to the main event. Now, this match is on tape, I recall, right? Rikidozan versus the Great Antonio.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think we don't have the version that was filmed by that poor producer that got his money taken from him. But
unfortunately,
we have Nippon TV's version, and that's good enough for us. So we'll move through June, see if there's anything exciting other than more matches. I'm seeing Kanji Inoki getting some wins here, but he is in the curtain jerker position. He is the first match on the show. Sometimes second, sometimes third, but he's there. He's still working. I was just going to refer to the All Asia Tag Team Championship match. That was the main event of the June 7th show. That had Rikidozan and Toyonobori, who are the champions. They went to a draw with Jim Wright and Ike Eakins. So that's kind of like a little cherry on top of the sundae if you were coming for a tournament-style match or a show that was related to a singles tournament to get a big-time tag team title match as the main event. That's a great deal. So I'm looking at a lot of the fans must have been satisfied with a lot of what was going on here because they were really serving the fans well. And I think, here's your June 9th thing. I just made it down to it. Kokichi Endo subbed for Toyonobori in his match with Carl Krauser because Toyonobori had injured his right wrist and withdrawn from the tour. Withdrawn from the tour? This is the tour. How do you withdraw from WrestleMania?
Well, Toyonobori, wrist injury out of the tournament at this point in time.
June 9th. He still has like 3 weeks to go. Could this be legit? Is it possible? I don't know. We'll have to go further. Maybe there's some details that will illuminate it. So this is the end. This would also be the last show that features the Great Antonio. After this match, Rikidozan fired him. One reporter claimed that when Great Antonio noticed the big crowds he was attracting, he asked Great Togo for a huge pay raise, claiming he had to send his money to his parents in Yugoslavia.
Wow.
Oh, boy. Another wrote that he was claiming to have left the tour because his contract expired on June 9th, but the truth is that he was boastful, demanded more money from promoters, and made the other wrestlers resentful. Also reported that Miller, Gotch, and Eakins approached Rikidozan directly and asked him to oust Antonio from the tour. That doesn't surprise me because they'd already beat him up, and that was weeks earlier, so I'm sure they were just done with it and said, do we need this guy? He's more trouble than he's worth.
I also got another little tidbit here in regards to Antonio's tour here. It says he attracted a lot of spectators in every city he visited, but by June, the novelty of his act seemed to have passed. He even tasted defeat in a handicap match, so doing the job on the way out.
Yeah, I think that is a good sign that that's the end of your run if you're the great Antonio and you're actually taking a job. It was in the main event, but still, Bill Miller defeats him via count out of ring. So Great Antonio does lose a match here, but it is in the main event of the June 9th show against Mr. X. Mr. X pins him in 7 minutes and 6 seconds, and then Mr. X gets a count out of ring in 33 seconds after that, but that's pretty much the end of the Great Antonio's experience in Japan, and he would not return for, another 16 years or so?
It's quite a while.
It's a long time. He had worn out his welcome for a million reasons, and it's no surprise that everyone was tired of his shenanigans. And after he leaves, there's a claim that he didn't have any opportunities to make a living. Well, he means that in Japan, he had to leave by ship without making an appearance in any film because he was talking about trying to get into movies and things.
Right.
In contrast to the throngs of people that came to see his arrival in Tokyo 2 months before, nobody went to see him off at the Yokohama port where he got on the boat. And back in the U.S., he spent most of the remainder of the year 1961 wrestling in Oklahoma and West Texas. And I can't imagine he was a problem in West Texas because those guys would mess him up something fierce. So he was probably on his best behavior in West Texas.
You would have to think.
Moving on in the tournament, and I'm seeing Carl Krauser, Carl Gotch in a lot of these main events, tag main events. So it looks like they're a fan of what Carl Krauser is bringing to the table in regards to his wrestling ability. And why wouldn't you be? The guy was a machine. We're making it to the very end of the tournament here. I made it to June 29th. Here it is. The third annual World League Final, best out of 3 falls, 61-minute time limit. Referee Oki Shikina, Rikidozan defeats Mr. X 2 falls to 1 to win the World League. Mr. X pins Rikidozan in 6 minutes to start. Second fall, Rikidozan pins Mr. X 1 minute later. Third fall, Rikidozan beats him via DQ in 5 minutes. So the main event of this entire tournament that goes 42 shows is over in 13 minutes.
I think Rikidozan has found his niche now. These 13-minute matches, 12, 15-minute matches, in and out.
Is he becoming Dusty Rhodes?
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Dusty drew a lot of money doing a little bit.
He did say it on TV. He says he gets his business done and doesn't worry about getting it done fast because the fans keep coming back. So in the main event, Mr. X does pin Rikidozan. The Great Togo told the referee that the masked man had used a foreign object in his mask when he headbutted Rikidozan. Interesting. So Mr. X got a pin over Rikidozan, but the Great Togo interfered or narked out Mr. X to the referee, saying they used a foreign object when he headbutted Rikidozan.
And so that makes Rikidozan, that was the third fall that happens in. So it's not even a pinfall. It's a reverse decision disqualification to determine. We've got a lot of shenanigans in these World League finals. I'm not a big fan of the way some of these are booked, but I guess he's trying to keep everybody strong, kind of Vince 1980s booking here with some of the top talent because he wants to bring him back again, I would have to imagine. But Bill Miller pins Rikidozan. Rikidozan pins Bill Miller in the third fall. Bill Miller scores another win using the old Mr. Atomic gimmick, loading that mask, but the Great Togo sticking his nose in where it doesn't belong. Damn baby faces, coming out and reporting to the referee what just transpired, and the match is reversed. The decision is reversed, and Rikidozan goes over.
Yep, the beauty of this is, as much of a schmoz finish as it is for him to win the World League, the setup is for a July 21st match between the two of them. This time, Rikidozan's going to put up his international title against Mr. X's mask.
Oh, there
so
you
it's a
go.
mask versus title match in 3 weeks. So the entire 42 card show leading up to this tournament was all a setup for a single show on July 21st. Talk about greedy. This guy's making money hand over fist, and now he's using WrestleMania, his WrestleMania, really as a prelude to promote a single show 3 weeks later. I love it.
Wow. Well, you can get away with anything at this point.
Yep. One other thing you can get away with is sending Baba and Mammoth Suzuki and Yoshinosato from Japan to work in Los Angeles under the management of the Great Togo. It's time for them to get some seasoning. Certainly, Baba needs it badly. I don't know about Suzuki, and Yoshinosato's already been out a couple times. So they're leaving to work in Los Angeles under the management of Great Togo. Great Togo's always involved in all. He's got fingers in everybody's pies here, taking cuts off the top of everybody. He would also have Baba train in Toronto under the guidance of Fred Atkins, who we know from other episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And he would become a top star in the States, specifically in the Northeast and Southern California. How couldn't you be? He was a physical specimen. He was certainly somebody that the fans wanted to see. Who doesn't love a giant? And they would wrestle in Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York for the next 12 months with Great Togo as their manager. And that's all three of them, Baba, Suzuki, and Yoshinosato.
Look at that, Dan, because we finished the World League here, and they leave. They're going off to the States, but it says for 12 months, an entire year, we're going to be Baba-less, it would seem, here in Japan.
Yep, interesting. So we're going to have to pay attention to what does that mean for Kintaro Oki? Does he move up one spot, or does Inoki take his spot? We'll be paying more attention to these house show results moving forward because we know who Rikidozan just brought on and is interested in developing as the next round of superstars.
Right.
The next tour is called Matches of the Summer. It runs for just under a month. They had 2 days off between the end of the World League and this next tour. A lot of the foreigners are the same guys you already knew. This time it's about half of them, though. Mr. X, Bill Miller sticks around. Carl Gotch sticks around. Ike Eakins, Jim Wright, and Tosh Togo, Harold Sakata stick around. So the first thing I'm noticing is Kintaro Oki is moved up to the 6th show on the card. And Kanji Inoki, not Antonio yet, is in the 3rd match on the card. So no major improvement yet. I'm not seeing any title matches. I'm just scanning through. We do have a JWA All-Asia Tag Team Championship match between Rikidozan and Toyonobori against Jim Wright and Ike Eakins on the 3rd of July. And they would retain the title 2 falls to 1. That would be their 8th defense. I'm not seeing any major movement on either one of these guys in this tour.
I see Inoki's moved up pretty much right behind Oki on the cards, the 6th, 7th match here.
That's why I've just seen it in the beginning of July here. I'm seeing him on the 6th match. He is going to draws against Nagasawa. Now, Nagasawa was not pushed super hard, but he was, moving up the card before the group exploded with a ton more new wrestlers. So Kanji Inoki is actually getting something of a push here, more so than Oki, who was already kind of at this point in the cards before Baba left. So
Right.
if we're noticing anything, is Kanji Inoki almost takes the spot of Baba here, where he jumps up 5 spots on the card.
Yeah, it's Oki's pretty much the same because Oki was already getting that little push you were talking about, and now Inoki's kind of right underneath him. They're almost nose to nose.
So I wonder how excited Kanji Inoki was to be waving goodbye to Baba when he went for his excursion, because he moved right up there. More draws with Nagasawa. I don't think he's had a match against Carl Krauser yet, but he's definitely up there in the card. So this is good. More time limit draws, and that's great because he needs time. Any new wrestler like this, you need time in the ring to be able to develop your craft. And the longer you go, it helps you learn which moves you can use 25 minutes into a 30-minute match and which moves you just can't, which moves require too much strength for you to be able to try that late in the match. This is important for any wrestler to learn, and Inoki's getting a lot of draws here, and more draws, I'd say, than Baba ever got. And maybe that's just because of his athleticism or his youth. He's got the energy to go that long. July 19th, we also have this is an All-Asia Heavyweight Championship match, so now Rikidozan's finally defending that title. and he defeats Jim Wright 2 straight falls. That's the main event of the July 19th match. That's in front of 12,500 people in Hokkaido Prefecture. Then on the 21st of July, and we talked about this, here's his match. This is the whole reason they had that build-up and that schmoz finish of the World League, the third World League. Best 2 out of 3 falls. Rikidozan defeats Mr. X in 2 straight falls, which will be the 12th defense of his title. The All-Asia Heavyweight title wasn't on the line. This was for the NWA International. First fall, Rikidozan won by a count out of ring in 13 minutes, 55 seconds. And then he beats Mr. X by default or a count out 21 seconds later. But
sounds like he never gets back in the ring.
No. And the big payoff is Mr. X unmasks here to be revealed as Dr. or Big Bill Miller. So that's the payoff for the fans. The fans get to see the unmasking.
So let me get this straight. We use our WrestleMania, we use the World League Finals to basically set up this card here, July 21st, which winds up going about 14 minutes total, and basically 1 fall. I don't care if it says 2, because Mr. X never gets back in the ring for the second fall. And both of them end on a count out. Wow. What a payoff.
Ouch. Now, this was seen, I don't have the attendance for it, but it was in Denon Coliseum in Tokyo, and it was packed to capacity. My recollection is Denon Coliseum holds at least 20,000 people.
Okay.
So it drew a big house, and this is a famous Coliseum that both All Japan and New Japan would later have some shows in. But I feel unsatisfied with this entire lead-in, but maybe it's just the benefit of hindsight, seeing all this build up the months and months and months, and it leads to a 13-minute count out of ring.
Do you think think fans know they're getting screwed in 1961 in regards to count outs? Are they satisfied with that? Because I've seen, even footage much older than that, or I should say newer than that, more modern, 70s or even 80s sometimes. You see fans go nuts when babyface is declared the winner, even if they don't win a title belt. And I'm sitting there going, what? Why are you cheering? The crowd's just happy that the good guy went over. And I guess they're probably happy Rikidozan won, and of course he retains the title, and Bill Miller unmasked, so they get that out of it. But I don't know, man. It was flat for me reading that finish.
There are things about Japanese wrestling I don't understand. One of the things is that fans cheer for a count out. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Well, if you keep a guy outside for 20 seconds, maybe you deserve a cheer. I don't know.
But that doesn't make you a better wrestler. It just makes you sneakier. I'm not sure that's what I'd be going for. I don't know. It's just something lost in translation. I'll chalk it up to that. I don't get a rise out of somebody sneaking into the ring at the 9.5 count to take a pin or take a fall in a multi-fall match. That doesn't do anything for me. To some degree, it was why I wasn't super excited with the first couple of matches with Jumbo Tsuruta versus Genichiro Tenryu, because it was the first match was a match where Jumbo got thrown over the ropes and got his leg tied up, and he was hanging upside down and just couldn't get back in the ring. If I was a real fighter, I'd want to fight you and defeat you. The fact that you can get back into the ring, that doesn't make me look any better. How does that put me over?
Getting counted out with your foot caught in the ropes. That was the old Fred Blassie routine. Yeah,
so now I'm complaining about a match that wouldn't even happen for another 26 years. But what are you going to do?
Hey, man.
So
show that vast knowledge.
So the TV episode after that, July 21st, is actually from still the middle of the World League Tour on May 22nd. And speaking of television, wrestling matches have been broadcast on TV from the Japan Pro Wrestling Center in Nihonbashi since 1957. But the building was too small, so Rikidozan decided to build a new one with larger capacity in a prime location near Shibuya Station in Tokyo, which I believe is a huge train station.
Right.
He said he imitated the structure of the Honolulu Civic Auditorium, the building in which he made his debut in 1952. Oh, that's a nice homage. Mm-hmm. And to reduce expenses even slightly, Rikidozan forced Baba and other young wrestlers to do the physical labor in the middle of the construction.
Oh, my God.
I love it.
Oh, my God.
Call it a workout, kids.
Yeah, ring crew.
The new venue for TV wrestling, called the Riki Sports Palace, was completed.
What else would it be called?
I know. It's got to be Riki something. On July 30th, about 1,500 people, including prominent singers, film stars, and politicians, attended the commemoration ceremony of its completion. The building was also equipped with 12 bowling alleys,
He loved
a
bowling.
sauna, and a restaurant.
What do you think he bowled?
I don't know if he had the time or attention to get really good, but if it's 10-pin bowling, I wouldn't be surprised if his average wasn't in the high 180s.
I would have said 180, Dan, so we're on the same page. Very cool.
10-pin's totally different than candlepin. Candlepin is real bowling. A professional candlepin bowler, you're lucky to have an average of 130. But that's another issue for another day.
That's another podcast, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into candlepin bowling more as the history of Japanese wrestling continues.
Okay.
So Rikidozan had so many other business ventures going on, luxury apartment rental business, a nightclub, and he had a grand plan for a golf course that he revealed to the press. I don't know if it ever came to fruition, but regarding boxing, you mentioned this. He was the first person to set up a professional boxing promotion to train heavyweight boxers in Japan. And it is claimed that it was his unfulfilled dream to produce a heavyweight champion from his boxing gym. How would this guy have time to do it? This guy is doing everything all at the same time. But when he opened up the boxing gym in Tokyo, people who controlled Japanese boxing world thought it would do damage to their market by promoting heavyweight boxing matches with foreign boxers. They didn't want to do that. They wanted locals. And as a result, they refused to allow him to join their group. And if he followed through with his intentions, he gave in to their demand, saying, we're not interested. We're only going to train locals. We don't want outside boxers coming in like you do with your wrestlers. But he continued his quest to train a top-flight heavyweight boxer. In 1962, he did hire Eddie Townsend, a former fighter, and brought him to Japan with the purpose of training fighters. A July 29th report in the Honolulu Star Bulletin said that Eddie Townsend, one-time Hawaiian AAU featherweight champion, trained and handled fighters for Rikidozan Enterprises in Japan. And after Rikidozan's death, Townsend trained Takeshi Fuji in Rikidozan's gym and guided him to the World Junior Lightweight title in 1965. In all, Townsend trained a total of 6 world champions. So that's pretty impressive.
Rikidozan's dream came to fruition, but posthumously.
Yep, he did a good job, and he picked the right guy. Like Togo was able to bring Great Antonio, which generated a lot of revenue for Rikidozan. Rikidozan had a knack for picking the right guy to help him make more money.
Rikidozan steps in a lot of shit and comes out smelling like flowers. I got to tell you, I've noticed that year after year. Everything he does just turns to gold somehow, some way. Yeah,
the guy is just super lucky. Everything, but then again, he's trying so many things that just statistically, some of them have to work.
Well, some of them probably won't work, as we will see in a couple of years.
Well, there's a good number that won't, but you keep trying. It's you're going to strike gold eventually. And he's charismatic, and he's a star, so he's always attracting people who have money and influence and power, and that always helps with the chance of success. Speaking of boxing, Yoshinosato tried to get into pro boxing in 1958, but the Boxing Association wouldn't allow it when he refused to give up pro wrestling. And after his death, a news report said, after Rikidozan's death, Dick Sadler, former handler of ex-light heavyweight King Archie Moore, was headed home after spending a year in Japan handling fighters for the late Rikidozan. So there's more evidence of Rikidozan's influence in the world of boxing in Japan. He was trying to get something going. He never quite got off the ground, although the people he was hiring were successful. He just never lived long enough to see it to fruition. We'll move on to the next tour. This one's in the summer.
Tour. Yeah.
And this one is the 41-card tour that we had mentioned. It starts in August and runs all the way to the middle of November. So it's over. Wow. It's exactly a 3-month tour.
Mm-hmm.
And this one features the Zebra Kid, as you had mentioned, Don Manukian, Aldo Bogny, Tosh Togo, he's always around, Red Miller, and Larry Jackson.
Wow, the good old Red Miller, Larry Jackson crew back in town.
There are a lot of matches that are taking place at the Riki Sports Palace, the place they just built, with the strong arms and backs of some of their own wrestlers, which is that's such a Rikidozan maneuver. I just think that's funny. There is a bit of a controversy here based on my research. One researcher claims the very first show held at Riki Sports Palace was on the 18th of August, but I have information that makes me think it was held 5 days earlier on the 13th. And I'm not sure which is true, but I can tell you the main event for the August 13th match in Riki Sports Palace was Rikidozan and Toyonobori and Michiaki Yoshimura going to a DQ against Aldo Bogni and Don Manoukian and the Zebra Kid. On the 18th, the main event is different. It's Rikidozan and Michiaki Yoshimura versus the Zebra Kid and Don Manoukian. So 2 different main events. It's not like I'm getting the date of the house show screwed up.
Right.
I just have 2 different sources each one claiming that it's the first house show in the new Riki Sports Palace. So, and
my understanding, Dan, and I could be wrong here, the 13th was actually the debut card in the Sports Palace. The 18th was the debut card for television in the Sports Palace.
Oh, so maybe it's just the way they phrased it and I just misinterpreted. That makes more sense. And it is, in fact, the very first TV taping at the Sports Palace. This tour is a little interesting. It's almost timed out that almost every show on this tour is a TV taping, or a lot of them are in the beginning, all at Riki Sports Palace, just to kind of debut it and maybe acclimate the fans to saying, guess where you're going to see a lot of wrestling from? The place I don't have to pay anybody for because I own it.
Didn't even have to pay anybody to build it.
I know. Oh my gosh, he is so funny. He's crazy. So I'm just going to kind of burn through this tour here to see if there's anything of note. I am keeping an eye on Kintaro Oki, still at the number 7 match on a lot of these shows. Kintaro Oki's 7th match, Inoki's commonly 5th or 6th match. So I would say so far this year, Inoki is clearly seeing the benefit of Baba being gone more so than Oki is. Oki is kind of staying where he was, but Inoki's really moved right up.
Yeah, and as you scroll through the results here, I just want to point out, running parallel to this tour, the Midgets are back for a 3rd tour here in Japan, working with the ladies once again, the All Japan Women's Wrestling. Skyla Low back, Irish Jackie, Little Beaver, and Bouncing Burke, who I'm not familiar with, but fun little midget matches, I'm sure, up and down. 21 cities, the tour there in the fall of 61, but we continue looking at the JWA here.
Yep, 21 cities during the tour. We only have limited information on them. More shows at Riki Sports Palace. No main events, no title matches of note that I am concerned about. But the one thing I do note here is that Rikidozan is going to visit America, joining the trio of Baba, Suzuki, and Yoshinosato, who were already there. And on September 19th, Rikidozan subbed for Togo on a TV match in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the only Northeast match of his whole career.
I remember that, pal.
I don't, 61, I don't know if he would have. He would have been relatively young then.
Been living in a trailer park somewhere.
That's true. Rikidozan teamed up with Yoshinosato to defeat Carlo Milano and Bill Zabisco, or we would know as Big Bill Dromo.
Yeah.
Rikidozan put Buddy Rogers on the spot during this time when he told a reporter, I would like to meet Rogers in the ring in the future, but Rogers' title is not a legitimate title. Ouch. Not helpful. I'm aiming at the world title Fred Blassie holds. Apparently, Rikidozan already had his sights set on the WWA heavyweight title, which is based in Los Angeles, California.
I was going to say, it makes sense. Obviously, Rikidozan had been working on the West Coast forever. And, of course, we just talked about him working L.A. And, of course, Blassie was the big – that's an understatement to call Blassie the big deal in Los Angeles at this point in time. To see those matches, know they're upcoming, Rikidozan, Fred Blassie. It only makes sense for Ricky to go after Blassie in that quote-unquote world title.
Yeah, and I can't imagine him saying anything about Blassie's heavyweight title if he hadn't already set up the match.
Right.
So he shows up to where his 3 youngsters are getting some training in the United States just to crap on that area's title and promote the title match that he's going to have against Blassie. That's very Rikidozan of him.
It's like it's an adjective now.
It is, because that's really tough. So we make it, I'll at least talk about this match on the show on September 29th.
Mm-hmm.
It is titled the Rikidozan Welcome Back Show.
Welcome back.
Yep. But he returns and he fights Don Manoukian, and he loses in 2 straight falls, both by DQ. So welcome back, and I take a loss against Don Manoukian. I can only expect that this is setting up a revenge return match coming down the road.
You would think, and once again, the 13 minutes is the limit here for Rikidozan, it would seem.
Oh, Ricky Dusty. I don't know. It just seems like short matches to me, especially when
J.Y. Dozan.
Oh, wow. Now that is an insult. Still drawing good houses, though. And look at these houses. I'm going to check. I just want to go a couple shows before Rikidozan returns. He only got 3,000, but then again, it's in the Riki Sports Palace. So that's probably a sellout for his Sports Palace of 3,000 people for his return show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find a non-Riki Sports Palace show before he gets back because I want to see if they're drawing okay without him being around. But all these shows are at the Rikidozan Sports Palace. He's probably smart for doing that. He doesn't want to risk sending his entire crew to some other venue without him on top because he's afraid it won't draw money. And at that point, what are we doing it for? So he gets back, and as soon as he gets back, they're in Kanagawa drawing 10,000 people. And the next show, he's drawing, I think, 15,000 people in Yokai Chiba City. So they're drawing huge houses now that Rikidozan's back, and we're making it into October now, this never-ending tour that's going to run to the middle of November. Rikidozan's wrestling some single matches against Bogny and some of the other outside stars leading through October. No title matches that I can see. Some tag matches are happening on television, but this looks pretty uneventful compared to the other tours of the year.
Yeah, we saw this last year as well, 1960, that final uneventful tour of the year, November, December, maybe October through December. I don't remember exactly, but I remember they brought in all those guys from the Army base and whatnot, and it just wasn't a whole lot going on there. Now, this time they do bring in a few big names. I mean, we even see Rikidozan in there again with his former nemesis from Hawaii, the Zebra Kid. So we do have a few decent names. Of course, Manukian had wrestled some in the Pacific Northwest, and Aldo Bogny, I think he'd already been here. I believe we've talked about him before on the show. He was also fairly well known over in the States, but other than that, it's more the Larry Jacksons, Red Millers of the world. And you have to remember, Dan, until Ricky comes back, we've already lost Baba, we've lost Yoshinosato, we've lost Mama Suzuki, and we lost Rikidozan there briefly as well.
And we lost, who the heck was it, Toyonobori.
Oh, yeah, he was out for a bit. Yeah, now he is back. I should have mentioned that. He's been back for a while. He came back in
the summer.
Right.
October 27th, you were mentioning that Rikidozan actually wrestles his enemy from Hawaii, the Zebra Kid, and this is one of them. It was a non-title match, but the reason I draw attention to this October 27th show would air live on TV and would feature the very first television appearance of a young Kanji Inoki.
All right.
He would be teaming with Kintaro Oki, who's the other guy that's not Baba that's getting pushed. They would fight against the team of Kokichi Endo and Masaki Tosanahana, and Kokichi Endo pinned one of the two. They're not sure who, whether it was Inoki or Oki. I'm guessing it was probably Inoki. 26 minutes and 12 seconds, but the match made it onto TV. Taking a pin by Kokichi Endo is a push because Kokichi Endo is the number 3 guy in the promotion. He's the number 1 guy behind Rikidozan as far as trust, but Toyonobori, now being back from an injury, is the other kind of superstar. But taking a loss to Kokichi Endo is not a negative at all, and you're getting on TV. So you're getting to see a young 19-year-old kid who's just getting into wrestling, and now you're getting your first glimpse at this kid who's going to get a push. So I just wanted to remark that the October 27th episode features his first appearance on TV.
Toledo, and that comes about 9 months after the Giant Baba, I should mention.
Yeah, he gets on TV pretty much right off the bat. But hey, you got to be happy when you finally get your shot.
He's off in the States, and Inoki's reaping the rewards at this point in time.
Yep, and as long as he doesn't imagine if he didn't take the pin in that match, then he's like, hey, I made it through a tag match and didn't have to take a pin. That's a real push for me.
Well, we got something interesting going on here, Dan, on November the 7th, it would appear.
I agree. November 7th in front of, this is Osaka Prefectural Gymnasium. We've had many shows of the JWA here, and they all end up being 15,000 people, packed to capacity. The main event for the NWA International Heavyweight Championship, Rikidozan against Zebra Kid. Rikidozan defeats him 2 straight falls, both count out of rings. This one goes 10.5 minutes. So he can't even make 13 minutes against this poor guy.
Hey, I'm sure Zebra Kid got paid well either way.
Well, I guarantee you got paid good for this match on November 7th, because at the end of the match, Rikidozan unmasked him.
Yeah, they recreate the story they told back in Hawaii many years past.
Yep, 6.5 years ago, they did the same angle, and he's just repeating it here, revealing him to be George Bullis. Bullis was unmasked quite a few times during his run as Zebra Kid.
When the money was right.
Yep, he likes being Zebra Kid, but he's not really attached to it that strong.
We have to remember, we're on our third unmasking now. If you count Lord James Blears, Rikidozan's just on a hunt here in regards to first Dr. Mr. X, Bill Miller, and now the Zebra Kid here in the fall of 1961.
Correct. I wonder if at this point we can call Rikidozan the mask hunter the same way we considered Sakuraba the Gracie hunter.
Oh,
because he's pulling all kinds of masks off of everybody.
Yeah.
One other thing I'm starting to see with these shows in November is that Toyonobori is absent from these shows. And knowing what we know about Toyonobori, his penchant for gambling and his money troubles, is I'm wondering if he's avoiding people who are coming to the shows looking for money that's owed. Because that's what Rikidozan was doing not that long ago, just a few years back. He would leave the country to avoid them.
Yeah, there's no really information that I can find in regards to Toyonobori just randomly disappearing here. We'll have to see if he turns back up before the end of the year, as we got one more tour to go.
The final tour of the year, the international competitions of the winter. It starts in the middle of November and runs to the very end of December, but only 9 cards. So this will probably be around a lot of Riki's Sports Palace shows that are on TV tapings. The guest foreigners, Mr. Who revealed himself. Oh my gosh, we're doing this again?
I was looking at this, the guest foreigners for this tour. We got Luther Lindsay coming in. Ricky Waldo's back. Remember him, the Vagabond, remember? Larry Jackson's still sticking around. Aldo Bogny back for this tour. And then a couple of masked fellows by the name of Mr. Who and the King of Mask. I don't know which name I like better. Mr. Who. Of course, Neidhart got to play the Who character. Who's on first? Third base. I don't know. But
I got it.
Vince McMahon.
King of Mask.
Yeah, King of Mask has to be one of my more favorite Masked Man names at this point.
Here's your problem, and I don't get it. I don't know why they do things like this, but it's pro wrestling, and it's crazy, so we're just going to say it because it happened. Something unusual happened the first night of the tour. 2 masked men who called themselves King of Mask and Mr. Who showed up to wrestle in the semifinal. Before the match began, Zebra Kid and Dan Manoukian, who had finished the tour and were going to leave Japan later that night, were sitting at ringside. They shouted at the masked men, quote, "You must be fake masked wrestlers. We know who you are." The 2 wrestlers who wore red masks became furious and immediately took off the masks. King of Masks turned out to be Ronnie Etchinson, and Mr. Who was Larry Hamilton, Rocky Hamilton. He was later better known as the Missouri Mauler.
Right, the brother of Jody Hamilton, the assassin.
Now, it is possible that they used this angle in an attempt to recreate the gimmick that Lord James Blears did 10 months before.
Because it worked so well that time.
Well, that's what I don't get, is that the crowd pooped on it the first time. Rikidozan may have thought that the TV viewers wouldn't be satisfied with the main event in which he was going to wrestle Aldo Bogny, so he wanted to add something sensational to the card. So he might have asked them to throw his masks on Etchinson and Hamilton. And at least Hamilton was making his first tour of Japan, so it wouldn't be like they'd be able to identify him. The reason for having Zebra Kid and Manoukian interfere may have been more to bring attention to the matter. So he was almost using these guys who were on their way out anyway to just like add a little spice to the angle.
So I don't know. 2 heels to call shit on 2 masked heels to get them to unmask before they wrestle their first match. And somehow this is going to generate tons of heat. I get it.
You do? I'm glad you do. I don't understand it. All I know is that it happened, and I'm willing to move on to the next show. And this
rolling
show
right
is
with you.
It's important to me, November 24th, 1961, not because it's close to Thanksgiving, but it's because Kanji Inoki gets a win on television. He defeats Mitsuaki Hirai in 12 minutes, 10 seconds. Kanji Inoki gets a pin on Hirai, and it airs on TV. So if there's any doubt that they're looking to push this guy, they're looking to push him. It may not be at the pace that Inoki wants, but they're doing the right things and they're taking their time with it.
And that's a huge deal, as you pointed out, Dan. That whatever you're seeing on TV is what they want you to perceive in regards to what's happening right now with everyone in the promotion.
Agreed. What you're seeing on TV is what they want the fans to see. Not only the fans buying tickets, but they want the world to see. This is what we think of the wrestlers that are on our shows. If our wrestlers are getting pins, heck, at this point, Inoki has already have more pins on TV than Masahiko Kimura ever got.
I'd say so.
Make note of that. Speaking of three-headed snakes, so Inoki's already got one over him. So we move into December. We're finally ending the year. We're close to it. We're rolling through December
14th. I think we have a tag title match.
Yep, and before that, we're starting to see some of these Oki versus Inoki matches. I think they wrestled like 15 or 20 times in the early days, and they're wrestling to draws. So on the 6th match of a 9-match show, Oki and Inoki are wrestling to time limit draws.
You know what was interesting, too, at the beginning of the year when Baba was here? I noticed there was a lot of Baba Oki matches. There was no Inoki Oki or Inoki Baba matches. So Inoki definitely was a peg down from those two. So I would say seeing all these Oki Inoki matches with Baba gone, Inoki's basically slipping right into that spot.
Yeah, this is a big push for Inoki, so I'm happy to see it because I think he deserves it, and he's got a huge upside based on his age. And it appears that somebody's in charge of booking this promotion. They're doing the right thing by Kanji Inoki. Regardless of how fast he thinks, if he's impatient or not, he's getting the proper push at the proper time. You mentioned December 14th, I believe, or
yes,
December 13th. December 14th. Yeah, we've got an All-Asia Tag Team Championship match. And this is Rikidozan and Toyonobori, who's not hiding from creditors anymore. And they defeat the team of Rocky Hamilton and Ricky Waldo, 2 straight falls. First fall is Rikidozan defeating Waldo by DQ in 13 minutes. And then Rikidozan pins Hamilton in 6 minutes later. So we actually get 20 minutes of action from Rikidozan in the main event. And that's nice to see. We move on to Riki Sports Palace on the 15th of December. And these are all 3,000 people because that's the sellout for Rikidozan Sports Palace. More tag team matches. They do go to Osaka. They draw some good numbers in Osaka. Back to the Sports Palace to end the year, December 29th, the final show of the year. And that has a non-title Rikidozan defeating Ricky Waldo, 2 falls to none, in what appears to be just under 12-minute match to end the year on December 29th in Tokyo, Japan, at the Riki Sports Palace in front of 3,000 people.
You know what I found comical about this final tour of the year? Luther Lindsay comes in, and they bill him as Ricky Waldo's cousin, of course, because they're both African-American, so I guess they just have to be related. What's funny is they don't necessarily team up very much, and I'm not saying cousins have to team up, but why build them as cousins if you're not going to use them as a tag team in any way, shape, or form? It's kind of odd to me. But I just noticed that as we were scrolling through. Not a whole lot of teamwork there from Waldo and Luther Lindsay at this point. Also, you talked about Toyonobori returning from maybe credit troubles. Made me start thinking that injury, that wrist injury during the World League. Who do you think gave him that wrist injury? Was it in the ring or outside the ring? Makes me wonder.
That is a good question. Now, he was super tough. He was a fire plug. I wouldn't want to go at him like that if that was the way. I'd do it with a knife or a gun, but that's just me. I wouldn't want to get on his bad side, even if he did owe me money. But I'm looking through and said, yeah, Lindsay and the other one, even to wrestle each other as like cousin versus cousin would be interesting or possibly be of interest to draw money.
Right.
And it appears they took no opportunities to do anything like that in the year of 1961, but we've made it to the end of 1961.
Yeah, and maybe they'll do something with them the following year. We'll have to wait and see. I really don't know, but man, we did it, man. We made it through. Lots of great notes, lots of things going on, and there's so much to pack in. Almost 2 hours of information here, Dan, and we really didn't sit here and look at results. So that just tells you how much is going on in the world of Japanese wrestling now.
Yeah, thank goodness for the great Antonio. He gave us at least 20 minutes of stuff to talk about, and none of it was in the ring. No,
definitely not. And I encourage everybody to go out there and Google the great Antonio, not just for his wrestling matches, but more so for his feats of strength. He was documented. There's lots of video footage out there. I'm sure it's on YouTube and other places as well. There's articles. And as you said, Dan, there's some stories out there, very questionable, interesting stories that I tend to believe, based on everything we read here about the character, And hopefully we'll have a little more on him at some point. He'll pop back up. Maybe he'll be on the video cast. Who knows? But speaking of the video cast, before we close up shop, I do want to remind everybody again. We've got another big one coming up with Bruno Sammartino, Mil Mascaras versus the Destroyer, Judo Jacket match, Anton Giesink versus Gorilla Monsoon, Jumbo Sharuda, dual matches there. We're going to see Jumbo earlier in the show against Mickey Doyle, and then the big main event, Jumbo challenging Jack Briscoe for the NWA World title. I'm so excited to call that one. Going to be releasing very soon over on our Patreon.
How many NWA champions have already covered on these video casts? With this second episode, I think we're going to have like 5 NWA heavyweight champions, if you count them all out, plus Bruno, plus Jumbo, who would become an AWA heavyweight champion.
Right.
Spoiler alert. These shows are just cram-packed with classic legendary wrestlers in their prime, and it's so much fun to watch this footage from over 50 years ago. It is a treat to watch this stuff and to talk about it. It goes right along with the history. You're going to get to watch history happen live on television, or as it was recorded. You're going to see it in person, watching and hearing us commentate on it. You really shouldn't miss it.
And it just keeps getting better. I've seen a lot of people reference the 60-minute matchup between Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. from Japan from around that time frame, begging you, Dan, to cover that one. And I thought, man, that's going to be a tough task because we know those guys go nearly the distance, if not the distance. Try not to spoil things out there for people who don't know. But, that's going to be coming up on an upcoming episode. Well, we're going to take a look into that matchup. 2 out of 3 falls, Briscoe versus Dory Funk Jr. for the NWA World title. So lots of great stuff coming. And it's just going to keep getting better and bigger as more talent comes in from foreign talent, Gaijin, but of course, more developing of the Japanese stars as well.
Yeah, watching Jumbo develop and get more experience in the ring is just so much fun to watch. He was so good back then. And the mannerisms, you can definitely tell he had some training in the United States with the way he moves around in the ring compared to the folks that were trained specifically in Japan. It's just, there's so much to see there. And the wrestling back then, maybe less flying around, but a lot more layered performance, a lot more little details thrown in. And if you've ever seen Mil Mascaras, you may know him as the high flyer. But in 1973, this guy was a tremendous mat wrestler. And when you see him against, is it the Destroyer we get to see him against?
Yes.
There are 2 matches I've seen with him, and both of them are unbelievable. It blew my mind, and it changed my opinion of Mil Mascaras as a wrestler. This episode that's coming up is going to change your mind about Mil Mascaras if you had any preconceived notions about him.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. It certainly changed my mind about him. Quite the hell of a grappler is Mil Mascaras we're going to see here against the Destroyer, and that's going to set up a return match, which we will either be covering in the videocast episode 3 or 4. So we're going to get to see both of those matches upcoming in the weeks to come. Be sure to stop over right now to the VIP Superfan tier, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. Sign up now. Spots are limited. But Dan, as we close out 1961 here, can you give us maybe an idea of maybe something that we can expect in 1962?
I'd say the biggest thing with 1962 that I know of, or during my research, is somebody shows up, and we've already alluded to it in 1961. Fred Blassie shows up in Japan, and I don't know exactly how to describe his effect on the world of Japan other than to say that it is dramatic and profound.
That's well put.
Well, Rikidozan is continuing to ride high. He's making a lot of money. He did very well in 1961. He leaves now just long enough to set up dates and make arrangements for outsiders to come in for these big title matches, and then comes right back to Japan to start running shows and making more money. 1962 would be more of the same, except one major change, or I'm not sure if it's major or not. The bi-weekly television show will change. I'm going to tell you this now on the 1961 episode. An arrangement is made because the wrestling television shows are so popular, they don't want to wait every other week because it was rotating with the Disney show on Sunday night every other week. But there was so much feedback from this television show that they decided on the night that Disney had the 9 o'clock time slot, they would air the wrestling show at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night because wrestling was so popular. So now at that point, sometime in 1962, Rikidozan has a TV show every single week, which doubles the amount of revenue that the network is going to pay him. So it's more of the same for Rikidozan. Everything seems to be going his way.
Until it doesn't. But that's 1963. We're not there yet. So, but man, that's a lot of good stuff to get into next time. Looking forward to all of that. Can't wait to see Freddie Blassie get involved, because if you listen to Blassie's stories, he caused a lot of people to have some heart attacks. He killed a lot of people without actually touching him over there in Japan. I don't know how much I believe that, but I believe a little of it anyway. But we'll talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure, as I'm going to do a little research myself on some of the comments Blassie's made. But we've got so much to get into. I'm looking forward to all of that and so much more. Dan, thank you so much for running us through another year in the history of Japanese professional wrestling.
I'm glad to have done it. I wasn't sure if we were going to make it through all the way, but we ended up doing it in the end. And another exciting year of Japanese pro wrestling history, 1961 in the books, and we keep moving forward. So for all of you that attended this class is dismissed.